go. So, good morning. This morning we're joined with our board member, Trish Ramsay, and we're going to be discussing a few areas from the ACT parenting program. And Trish, I wonder if maybe you can tell everyone what the ACT program is.
Hi, Elise. Very nice to see you today. The ACT Raising Safe Kids program is a program designed by the American Psychological Association. And what these experts have done is put together a guideline for working with parents primarily of young children from birth or before birth to the age of 8, because we know that this is the groundwork for all our adult behaviors.
Absolutely. Also, Trish used to have my job as the education director, so she has a big background in doing the ACT. And can you explain a little bit about your involvement in the ACT program?
The ACT program was developed in 2001 by the American Psychological Association. And at first it was just being presented to people with psychology backgrounds, the psychologists and the therapists. And it was discovered that more and more agencies that were dealing with parents actually needed all of this information as well. And so that's how the Melissa Institute for Violence Prevention and Treatment became involved. My background is in education and in EEG technology, neurology-based education. And so I was really pleased, though. In 2006, I became trained as an ACT facilitator and eventually became what they're considering a master trainer. Now that I have a 2.5-year-old grandchild that I'm taking care of, it's being tested, definitely tested. So I have my own little laboratory now.
Perfect. It's a perfect chance to have the hands-on, you're re-experiencing it again.
Absolutely, absolutely. So if I could, I'd like to start by talking about the power of feelings, because as human beings, we are just complex conglomerations of feelings. But as very cognizant individuals, and the more we know, the more we can know. And the power of feelings is understanding. If we start with that, then that helps us work with our children better. So this is for parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, teachers, anyone who is a grown-up in a growing up child's life. I like to talk about sympathy, because empathy and sympathy are two emotions people get mixed up on, but I'll try to make them simple. Sympathy is feeling sad for someone, and we see that in young children. A child crying and another child who can move over to them will start patting them sometimes on the back. So sympathy is a very early emotion in young children. Empathy is a little bit more involved, and that becomes a higher order kind of thinking as we grow. And I begin to even see this in my 2.5-year-old grandson. They develop empathy. They know when somebody else is sad, and they often share those feelings even if they can't quite explain them. They might explain them more by crying or yelling, but empathy is when you truly experience and understand the thoughts and feelings of someone else. This is something we always bring up when we're talking about bullying prevention. So it starts very, very early, because we know in preschool, little children start to bully one another as they're exploring their powers, and other children become victimized, and we try to teach empathy even as young as 2. The other 2 emotions that I always throw out there so children and adults will think about it is apathy. Apathy is more this absence of feeling. It's more like, I just don't care. And right now, I think we see some apathy taking place in our society when people decide not to go along with guidelines and directions and instructions that would keep us all healthy within our community. Then the more difficult and most horrendous emotion, I guess, would be antipathy. Antipathy or animosity is actually hate. And we know we see that in our society today as well. So circling back, as parents, as grandparents, as aunts and uncles, we want to be leaders and leadership, showing our young children how to have sympathy and empathy for others. That makes us stronger and better prepared human beings in our vast and changing world.
Yeah. And what you, when you describe those, and especially that difference between sympathy and empathy, I'm just thinking about explaining it and how do we talk to children about those things, about empathy or about sympathy?
One of the things that I have done in talking with a little bit older children, um, empathy is more difficult other than to say, how would you feel if that was being done to you?
Mhm.
And that can start very early.
Mhm.
If this child took your toy away, how would you feel? And helping children as they're developing their language begin to understand to apply that language to their feelings, which even as an adult, this is one of the most difficult things to do. How to express myself so that you understand how I feel. And it starts very early. And while we help our children do this, we will discover within ourselves we're getting better at it too. Our children show us pathways into thoughts and feelings that we might not have had since we were children ourselves. So you will often hear your kids will teach you the world, which is very, very true. With older children, what I have said, like the 7, 8-year-olds, I would say, if you've ever had a pet, and many children have had some sort of pet, a fish, a lizard, a dog, a cat, and something happened to that animal. And then I say to them, well, I had a little dog and my dog passed away. So I know you know exactly how I feel when I lost my animal. And that is helping them understand what true empathy is. You know that feeling deep inside of you. If you hit your elbow and it really hurt, and I say to you, "Ooh, I'm so sorry that happened," it's not just that I'm sympathetic that you hit your elbow and it hurts. I also understand how it feels, and I can tell you that. And I think when parents share a part of themselves, or caregivers of any age, share a part of themselves to the child, children perceive this even if their language is not fully developed. Because at least as you know, and I know, children's comprehension is way ahead of their ability to speak, is extremely complex to learn to speak, but the understanding comes much sooner. And sometimes we get a peek about this when we see very young children who can speak early. But even if you have a child who's a delayed speaker, they often understand and have full comprehension. And you can find out by saying, go pick up the red ball, and you'll be surprised they'll go get the red ball. So this is how, I'm sorry, my diverting from empathy and sympathy, I think are practiced by the parent or the caregiver. And that will be the way they'll learn the fastest.
No, absolutely. It makes me think of Sesame Street did a video that's called E is for Empathy with Mark Ruffalo. And it's a great resource. It basically said it similarly to what you did. It's a really cute video about empathy and how, what's the difference, what it is. And
You bring up something really important too, and I know we're not supposed to make a lot of recommendations, but I do have a few. Sesame Street is 50 years old and been doing a wonderful job. And I think for parents that are so stressed right now, even though we don't like a lot of media time for children, I think the situations and the crisis that we're in has exceptions where if they're going to be watching more media, because they are, make it things that are really nutritious for their brain. And that would be things like Sesame Street, things like Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood, which is based on the work by the famous Mr. Rogers. And another one that I have discovered is called Baby First. So even for very young children, if a mother or father or caregiver is needing a break, if they're going to put the child in front of media, it needs to be something that is, as I said, nutritious, that is going to be good for that developing brain. Can I move on to something, because this seems to be in our ACT Raising Safe Kids program, which is usually a 16-hour program. One of the most important concepts, and this is by feedback from the parents and grandparents and aunts and uncles and teachers who have taken this class, is learning the difference between react and respond. React is something we all do. In fact, the minute you feel angry, your body starts to react. And if you follow through on that emotional tone that's being reactive, and you may be sorry later. So, what we really work on is trying to talk about let's respond with our children. If they're reaching for a hot pan or the hot water or the stove, yes, react because that's very fast. You've got to do that quickly. But in every other situation, maybe running to the potty, that's also a little reactive sometimes. But in every other situation, what we are looking for is response and respond. To think a moment before you act. Sometimes it's as fast as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. Just quickly breaking the innervation that causes you to be reactive so that you may be responsive. I want you to be mindful. I want you to think about what you want next. What are you really wanting to accomplish with your child? And staying in control of yourself. Because when we react, if it is in anger or in haste, and we're hastily saying something we don't mean, then we have lost our power. We're giving away our power. And this is so difficult with kids, and it is so difficult when you're so tired. Everybody's tired of being inside. But beyond that, a mother or father who's being wakened during the night by crying child, they're tired just by sleep deprivation. The parents who are sitting there worrying about things, they're maybe tired just from that stress, or again, sleep deprivation, or numbers of children. And it depends on your space load. You may have a lot of people crammed into a very small space. So once again, urging people to please take a breath, count to 10 as fast as you need to, and then take time to think about what do I want to do next? What is my goal? For example, there are different things called logical consequences and natural consequences. A natural consequence would be you have a puppy dog and your little toddler has a cookie in their hand and you say, hold your cookie up or the puppy's going to get your cookie. Well, toddlers don't remember that for very long, and their hand drops downward, and what does happen? The puppy swoops in and grabs the cookie. And then, of course, the child is devastated. Well, yes, they're devastated, but this is a natural consequence. That's just something that the laws of nature will take over. Another example is if you have a helium balloon, and I think I've told this story before. If you have a toddler and they want to hold on to the balloon and you want to tie it to their wrist so it doesn't go away, but they want to hold it, you say, well, if you let go, that balloon will fly away. And it's almost totally predictable that that little hand is going to let go of the balloon, because even adult hands do sometimes. The little hand gives it, and then the child is so upset. And that's where something we'll talk even more about in discipline, attraction and distraction. You distract them from that moment and say, okay, let's wave bye-bye to the balloon and throw kisses to the balloon because it's going to go up to the sky now. And there are ways to adapt to natural consequences. When the cookie's eaten, then you let's go wash our hands, and maybe you decide to give them a little cookie in a sit-down place rather than walking around where the pup can get it. When it comes to the balloon, maybe the next time they will let you tie the balloon on, or you get a balloon that has a weight to it, so that when they're holding on to that balloon, the weight is holding on to the balloon too. And a lot of helium balloons now from party places will come with a little tiny weight. So there are solutions, and we want to also be thinking ahead about this. So let me reiterate about react and respond, because those were natural consequences. We can talk later about logical consequences, but just as a preview of that, that would be if the child is coloring and they color on the table, then they help clean up. If they're sitting and they're throwing their food on the floor, then we calmly get out of their chair and they help us pick it up. Depending on age, everything is age related. I am kind of focusing on these things where the child is actively involved, because infancy is a much easier thing to understand. It's the toddler and the toddlerisms that can push our stress level all the way up. So just to reiterate, to complete this little segment, react is when we go based on our feelings without thinking. Responding is when we take time to calm ourselves down, even momentarily, just takes moments. It's split seconds. It's actually milliseconds to calm ourselves down. And that we look for a solution before we proceed. before we make an act, we think about what we want. And you can practice these things in your mind. We don't automatically know how to do everything. And just as adults, we have to practice just like a child does. And you can watch a child practice their ABCs over and over again. You did not learn the ABC song singing at one time. Even Sesame Street and Daniel Tiger's Neighborhood will repeat things throughout the show over and over again because it's with practice. We don't get perfect, but we go for progression. Thanks, Elise, so much for having me today.
You saying the ABCs makes me think of when I wash my hands too. I sing the ABCs every time, so it still comes in handy. But thank you so much.
Yep, it sure does.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.